Hello, Travel Habits here, recording another voiceover for another training long. First and foremost, I would like to thank subscribers number 32 and 33. And yep, let's get right into it. I've got a couple of topics to address this time around, things I've been keeping on my mind regarding training, and just some solutions I've arrived to or just think I've arrived at. Just current solutions to the topics I'm gonna address. So, for starters, I want to acknowledge something that I've mentioned previously, the juggling of all different aspects of training. So, juggling science, skill, and art, and acknowledging that all these are indeed factors, just part of this craft, and that you need to keep an eye in all of them instead of being overly fixated on one facet of this pursuit. And in the past, I have been overly fixated on the scientific side of training just due to a results oriented mind frame. And ironically, I then made much better progress when I decided to look at it from a broader perspective and understand that I also needed to consider skill, and I also needed to consider the artsy side of training. This then led to another issue, however, and this is how things go usually. So then you need to come to terms with experimenting versus not committing. It's okay to be experimental and to chase the thing that best fits you personally, but doing this in a way that allows for consistent effort to take place. And for consistency, you cannot be changing everything so often, otherwise you're not sure. Or and I have discussed ways in which you can be sure, right? So instead of tracking progressive overload on specific movements, you might be tracking just overall strength gains on a movement pattern. So instead of being, oh, I got stronger at the bench press, is I got stronger at pushing horizontally, or horizontally, I'm pretty sure. You see, so it's different, and you might do this by just occasionally testing 1 rep maxes. But of course, that doesn't mean that there's no value in just consistent trackable progress in progressive, like classic progressive overload fashion, right? You just added a rep, you keep the same exercise, and now to the second variable that I mentioned, we juggle. So skill, it's also important that skill isn't such a big component, right? You know, if you keep the same exercise, you know that you aren't gaining reps or gaining weight due to the experience, like just skill component of practicing that, and it is muscular tissue development, right? Because that's the most meaningful form of adaptation, the long-lasting one. And so during this process of experimenting more, I've now arrived at what I believe to be the conclusion, which is I've been experimenting too much with volume and intensity, as well as being completely fascinated with biomechanics concepts that have helped me tremendously. And through all of these things and experimenting with all of them, I've struggled quite a lot with making them mine and using them in a way that benefits and fits me best. And in the way I'm going to be doing that from now on is selecting some exercises which I think I've picked right this time, and being consistent with them for quite a long time. And I'm making that commitment now. And additionally, lowering volume quite a lot, because through these last 8 months, I believe this 2-set format, and then occasionally a third set of a different exercise, slightly different stimulus, to be the format that will best work for me, taking into account the fact that all these sets are intense from the RIR perspective. These are all sets taken to failure. And initially I thought, well, these are not so intense from the one rep max perspective, So I wasn't connecting the dots intensity wise, and I believe this way it will be much more appropriate. Now for this week's dose of somewhat cohesive scattered thoughts. Memories become muscle. Whatever you have lived and experienced physically will be engraved in that said physical. In case of healthy skepticism, I encourage you to think of how your body autonomously reacts to anything remotely related to a trauma you have, and understand the same phenomenon applies to other contexts. However, what I'm getting at here is slightly different. It's not a reaction, it's about a sensation, about having a feeling ingrained in your physical. A personal example. 3 years ago, I randomly picked up a person and felt crushed by the sense of weakness that emerged as a result. I felt inadequate because I sincerely desired to be able to protect this person. She was dear to me after all. Just yesterday, I picked this same person up without any particular reason and without remembering this other occurrence. Yet as soon as I did, I felt shaken by how effortless it was. And the reason such an uneventful thing had such an emotional impact on me is because my body remembered, even if my conscience didn't. The weightlessness made me feel empty because I could no longer find a palpable answer for as to why I still felt inadequate.